My first remembrance of fashion was the day my mother caught me parading around our middle-class Catholic home in a lace-curtain Irish suburb of Boston. There I was, 4 years old, decked out in my sister's prettiest dress. Women's clothes were always much more stimulating to my imagination. That summer day in 1933, as my back was pinned to the dining room wall, my eyes spattering tears all over the pink organdy full-skirted dress, my mother beat the hell out of me and threatened every bone in my uninhibited body if I wore girls' clothes again. My dear parents gathered all their Bostonian reserve and decided the best cure was to hide me from any artistic or fashionable life. This wasn't hard in suburban Boston. A drab, puritanical life prevailed, brightened only by Christmas, Easter, the Thanksgiving Day parade, Halloween, Valentine's Day, and the maypole costume party in kindergarten. My life was lived for each of these special days when I could express all the fancy thoughts in my head. Of course, Christmas was the blowout of the year, and I started wrapping the packages months before anyone dreamed of another Christmas. The tree ornaments were packed away in the attic, where I usually dusted them off with a trial run in midsummer and prepared a plan of decoration for the coming season. When Christmas came, I must have redecorated the tree a half-dozen times in the short week it was left to stand, and when New Year's Day arrived and the tree was to be thrown out on the street, a deep depression usually set upon me, as I tucked all the glamour, the shiny tinsel, away for another eternally long year, and only the thought of Valentine's Day, with its lace-trimmed displays of love, made life bearable. Easter Sunday was always a high point. I can remember every one of Mother's hats, which were absolute knockouts to my eyes, but when I look back today, they were all very conservative. My 2 sisters and brother Jack, who was all sports-minded, and I, were outfitted in new clothes for Easter Sunday. This was the dandy day of my life. I can't remember a thing the priest said during Mass, but I sure as hell could describe every interesting fashion worn by the 200 or so ladies, and for the following few Sundays I kept an accurate record of which ladies wore their Easter Sunday flower corsages longest, emerging from the refrigerators for the Sunday airing. The next excitement I can remember was the maypole costume party, where I managed, much to my conservative family's embarrassment, to be a crepe paper pansy, violet, or daffodil. I always had a ball playing make-believe, and usually got hell when my mother got her hands on me, as I'd play with the girls, mainly because their costumes were the most beautiful roses. The boys were bees and caterpillars, which didn't interest me a bit. Summers were a fashion desert. Our small beach house on the south shore of Boston allowed nothing but bathing suits and T-shirts and lots of horrible sunburn on the miles of salty beach. No one ever wore anything colorful or gay. Each Sunday's church was the only adventure, as my brothers and sisters and I were wrapped in starched white clothes and chalk-white shoes. During the reading of the Gospel, I eyed every woman and decided who was the most elegant. It was a wonderful game, and by the end of each summer I would produce my list of the women at the beach whom I thought most exciting. Going back to school was really the monster for me. I couldn't have cared less about reading, writing, and arithmetic, and they cared much less for me. It was only through the grace of God and the teachers who didn't want to have me around another year that I finished each school year. The only class I remember was a weekly 1-hour art session where the most delightful, slightly eccentric teacher would read Winnie the Pooh and tell us about Mrs. Jack Gardner's Venetian palace set in Boston's Back Bay. This was my hour of pure dream and fantasy. Of course, I immediately fell passionately in love with Mrs. Jack Gardner and her gilded palace, and to this very day she is my inspiration. Life really began for me on my first visit to Mrs. Jack's. That marvelous art teacher took the class to view what she called a Renaissance splendor. It was the opening of the doors of paradise for me, and there was no stopping my desire to create a world of exotic beauty. No matter how many times my mother caught me wearing my sister's first long party dress, which was peach satin, and I know I wore it more than she did, I knew my destiny was to create beautiful women and place them in fantastic surroundings.